the leaders of the demonstrating, backing out orders to the protesters.
Yes, I never got this one in
Oh my God, there's blood oozing out of the gentleman, and all you see is policemen pouring water on him.
It's a situation that has degenerated. It's been utter chaos.
We expect them to credit our accounts within these 48 hours that we are going to carry here.
We shouldn't have to come here at this age. Why? You have no heart? Are we not human beings too?
That's why we need this constitution changed now.
Patient at the Gumfonochi Teaching Hospital stranded following strike by doctors who alleged forceful ejection.
You feel bad. Why are the police preventing the citizens from demonstrating?
Beat me, kill me, but you will not stop me from speaking.
The Ghana will work again.
The Ghana police is breaking the law and denying us our right of simple movement.
If he didn't know how to fix the economy, why did he run for office?
We want to see people prosecuted. We want to see money taken back. We want to see corruption dealt with in a clear way. We, the people, are the ones with the power. The more we complain, the more things will be done.
Police have been arresting us all the time, so this is not news.
Bangladesh, Brazil, China, Gaza, France, Haiti, Congo, Sudan, Ghana. All over the world, the people are rising up. So much that 2023 was unofficially named the Year of Protests. But protests aren't a new phenomenon anywhere, and certainly not in Ghana. Protests have always been a way for the people to register their displeasure, snowball change, and raise awareness for important issues and let muffled voices be heard.
I've been involved in perhaps all the major protests that have happened in the last 30 or so years, but in different capacities. The ones that were organized by the National Union of Ghana Students against the PNDC rule, I was a key leader. One of the most unfortunate incidents was the protest that led to the shooting of our sister Vada Ofori and Veronica Dompre on the IPS campus, now UPSA.
There have been all the time attempts by governments to make it difficult for people to demonstrate. They think they can buy loyalty by stopping demonstrations. It doesn't work. It has never worked that way for any government. But, you know, governments and politicians being who they are, they rarely learn lessons from the past.
It's not because I hate you, but I have to tell you, things are not working. Why are we breathing all this dust? Why is the water not working? Why do our light bills keep going up? It's not about animosity. It's about facts. Is it true or not that these things are not happening? What are we doing about it?
There were a number of protests that Uncle Kwesi Pratt organized by himself. And these were long before the Preko marches came up.
Now, the earlier demonstrations, the small demonstrations, the one-man demonstration, the 5-people demonstration, and so on, basically was meant to raise awareness, amongst our people that there was a need to embark on the path of democratic transition. We had the Rawlings regime in power from 1982 all the way up to 1991. It was pursuing neoliberal policies which were not in the interest of our people, and these protests were meant to serve as a focal point of mobilization in order to aid the transition, to democratic governance.
In the 1890s, when the British government wanted to take over ownership of the lands in this country, the chiefs, particularly along the coast, and the lawyers at the time, Mensa Saba and others, protested against that. And out of that was formed the Aborigines Rights Protection Society. Now, this protest was very significant in our history and for our independence.
Of course, we know our independence was won on the foundation of protest. So we have the 1948 disturbances where the veterans went to the World War, came back. The promises that were made them were not honored by the colonial authorities. So they embarked on several protests. Osajifo himself embarked on protests and was arrested, detained, and was released before independence and all that.
Nkrumah leaves James Fort Prison freed by the governor as an act of grace on the eve of the inauguration of the new constitution.
So you could see that protests are designed not for people who are interested in being unlawful. It is actually a lawful activity to protest.
This thinking that the only way in which we can achieve social change if we get elected, I absolutely disagree with that thinking. But we think that there's a lot more social role that can be played and a much more social progress that can happen if the entirety of society is much more engaged in the business of holding people to account. One of the ways in which law operates is that it tries to find a remedy for every problem you have. So for instance, if somebody slaps you, you go to the police to be able to seek some remedy in that sense. Or somebody breaches a contract, you go to the courts. The court gives you a particular remedy. But a protest is not a defined administrative remedy for any wrong you're suffering. But yet every democracy guarantees protest. Why? Because some of the most significant social advancement, the abolition of slavery, giving women the right to vote, independence, those things did not come about through administrative procedure. They came through protest.
The first thing we need to know is that demonstration is a human right, and that is acknowledged, guaranteed, and protected by the 1992 Constitution. There is only one limitation that we have put on it, which is to notify the police for purposes of public order.
But it's important to understand that leaders, national leaders, political leaders and all, always want to prevent protests. Always. And that trend continues. One of the machinations indeed was the introduction of the public order law, which I think is an affront to the 1992 Constitution. Now, the public order law says that for public events, you need to give the police 5 days notification. The route we are going to use for the protest, an estimate of the number of participants and so on and so on.
But this kind of thing is used arbitrarily by the police to stop certain demonstrations. But when that happens, you can see that it is not the independent decision of the police.
And when there's disagreement between the police and the organizers, the matter then goes to the High Court for a determination.
So it's a balance. But when the balance is going to tip, it must always tip in favor of the stability of the nation. And I'm very careful in saying that, because sometimes the people in power will say for national stability. And no, it's not that. It's just for somebody's personal sense of peace.
And there's one particular High Court judge who actually stated in a ruling that every demonstration is potentially violent, and therefore demonstrators need police permission to be able to demonstrate. I mean, this is a clear affront to the provisions of the 1992 Constitution.
I can just hope and expect that every time any restriction on the exercise of rights comes before a court, the court has to look at the circumstances, the situation, the objective, and what is reasonable. Because in these rights matters, there's always a nuance, but the nuance has to be such that it does not stop protest.
If I have the right to go or protest, and your reason for denying me the protest, for example, is that there's Christmas, then there is a certain level of misunderstanding of the thing called rights. And that is why the Supreme Court, in as early as I think 1993 or 94, thereabout, MPP versus IGP, that very important case. And the issue was simple. Before that case, the law was that when you want to go on protest, you should apply and get a permit from the police commander before you go. So that was the case, and the court said no, it agrees with the plaintiff that this is a right, and to the extent that it's a right, I don't need anyone's permission to be given to me before I go on protest. Takes the thing out of the realms of what? Right, to something of privilege, at someone's discretion.
In law and in jurisprudence, these rights are not even considered as rights that are conferred. These are rights that is innate. You are a human being. Therefore, you have the right to disagree. Because protest is what? You're disagreeing. Of course, there will be parameters within which to exercise that. You cannot pick up a stick and go and bash somebody on the head in protest, because that person also has a right to life. So any system that does not assure it, and that also does not allow channels for disagreeing, that is also huge flaw.
A patriot who often mobilized people and protests, particularly in the area of economic issues, was Ni Kobna Boni. The newspapers at the time called him Boycott Hene. And one of these protests is what brought about the expression Awam. Awam stands for Association of West African Merchants. And so the boycott slogan was Awam people are cheats. Boycott Awam. So then Awam, which originally is an acronym, became synonymous with Azan, cheating. So the 1930s, 1940s were times of our people, our elders protesting for their freedom.
Of issues, scope of issues that will push workers to go on strike or demonstrations or protest, however we choose to call the actions that workers may embark on. But part of the discussion should also be centered around the fact that, first, workers are citizens, and then they are workers. So issues that affect citizens generally will affect them as workers, and then issues relating to happenings in the labor market will also be something that will cause them to hit the street. Like, how much are we earning to pay electricity tariffs that are so high? How much are we earning to pay water bills that are so high? How much are we earning, to be able to pay our kids' school fees with inflations going up and other things? All those are conditions that may lead to workers going on strike or taking actions.
Yes, a lot of fairness. I'm on to Sonia, I'm on to Somaya. Tell my reduce yes, I want to Nasa Bufaba, Nasa say, Yakase, Kokode-Nwamase. Tassamani Nano Nipa formed on Kwajmano. Almost Omunya, Queen of Kwajmana, Ama, Ghana, Sonia Home Paso.
When these happen, it doesn't just affect the national government, it affects private sector, because labor unions organize in the private and then government sector, as well as informal sector, which includes our market and the drivers on the street as well.
After waiting for several hours without being attended to, Ishmael had to return home with his sick dad.
They told us I should come today. When we came, they say the doctors went to strike, so we are going back to Western Off.
If you look at our history, both what survives of the long pre-colonial period, even before the establishment of formal colonial rule, women were always there in the positive action campaign. Some women went to prison, and yet the way we teach our history, we don't bring these things out at all. So women have always been there, they've been part of it, they have strategized.
In the 90s, I participated in a protest by women seeking protection during a period when there was a serial killer.
There was a lot of public sympathy. Now, of course, there was also a pushback from the regime, because one of the things that we were also highlighting was that clearly the state security couldn't be very good for these acts to be perpetrated on women. We had some demands. We wanted the IGP, the then IGP, sacked. Soon after, the IGP called me because I knew him. And now he was calling me, oh, my sister, we don't have vehicles for patrol. Anyway, he was sacked. The police started cooperating with us. And when they had leads about who the possible murderer might be, they called us to brief us about it. When the perpetrator was arrested, the killing stopped.
In Atame's time, until Yeshua Ahumachi 2 o'clock. Latest by 7:30, another foreign day Ahumachi the same thing. Sana until bedroom rebia. Almost say, family free home. One day, and a year who say, Yabaya demonstration, Aqua Castle. Say, you say almost a year to free her. Omanya baby, papa, besu, Maya.
One of the traditional modes of protest is for a woman to take off her clothes. It's almost like seeing your mother's nakedness is the ultimate form of insult and curse.
Like I see, you be naked. And I pay for say, demonstration, naked. Yes, I beg a man.
Sometimes they even turn around and make it worse when they are naked and they bear their bottom at you. That's the kind of worst insult.
So if not because of the demonstration, who are these women here? We are nobody. Because of the demonstration, that is why they are allowed us to stay here.
I was frustrated because the lights were constantly off all the time. I remember one evening I went on Twitter and I tweeted, "Dumso must stop." And I realized it was trending. It trended for a week. And I decided to rally my friends together, go out there and let our voices be heard. And that's exactly what I did.
What I'm asking for is just light. If you can't give us the water, you can take the water, you can buy the water. But it's just about we don't want to destroy our country. All we want to do is just fix the economy, fix the lights, and we have a prosperous country. That's all we're asking.
Big companies with millions of cities like Palco, Akotombo Textiles, and so on that have been shutting down their operations, have been complaining about Dumso for years.
One thing that I have noticed about online protests is it puts pressure on the decision makers. It might start off as just a couple of tweets or a couple of Instagram posts, but when it starts growing like wildfire and it starts getting viral, they have no option but to succumb to the pressure, because then now everyone is talking about it, all media houses are reporting it, and sometimes it sparks global interest. And at that point, as a decision maker or as a policy maker, you would have no option but to either listen to the people or take action to support what they are doing.
The BBC came into the country to cover Occupy Jolobi protests, not because somebody sent a press invitation for them to come. They noticed the conversation online and they came to Ghana to cover the protest. And that is what social media has done and will be doing. So it's a beautiful game of chess. Depending on how you use social media, it could help make your country look good. At the same time, it could also give your country a very bad PR.
Police officers now arresting some of the protesters who came here and said they're going to protest despite police preventing them.
Hungry man say fix the country. Bellefou say fix yourself.
I think Occupy Jolobi House was one of the protests that you can arguably say was driven heavily by the youth of Ghana as a result of the conversations that were had on social media. And for some reason, there was this wake-up call and what I witnessed in terms of the near-perfect situation in day 2 and day 3 and the misdemeanor of security agencies or security personnel like the Ghana police and how they manhandled human beings. It was just an eyesore moment, and what I experienced on ground, I saw wickedness.
That was my first demonstration as a journalist. So it was usual when we gathered at the designated point, I saw police actually arresting some people.
Initially, I wasn't particularly interested in Occupy Junobi. I wouldn't have gone anywhere near it. But my interest became high when the previous day I saw a public notice. And the notice is so embarrassing in the sense that they have filed an application for an injunction and are seeking to serve it on the conveners, and therefore the public should not attend the demonstration. As a lawyer, I couldn't accept that as a proper exercise of police power. And what even got me more incensed about the whole thing is that the notification was sent to the police way ahead. So they had almost like 1 month. Actually, they have the law says 5 days, but they had more than that to go to court and do all this. But they chose the afternoon before the day of the demonstration as the day to make the application, which shows a lot of bad faith and dictatorial sentiments.
At the Accra Regional Headquarters, I saw police officers beating people I will later get to know are protesters and bystanders. My first instinct was to take my phone and record. And I think about 15 seconds into the recording, I was surrounded by police officers, numbering more than 6. They started stamping my feet with their boots. And then there was this female police officer also hitting my chest, like, bring the phone. She kept hitting my chest, bring the phone, bring the phone. I also said I won't. And then I hid my phone in between my thighs. And they all reached for the phone in between my thighs, pulling me.
They ripped my dress apart and I'm on TV in my bra. In my bra. Not that I wanted to, but because these Ghana police service are irrational and unprofessional, and frankly, that colonial British method needs to stop.
Our police need to be taught how to be keepers of the peace rather than to be a police force. We used to call them police force, the days when they were bashing our heads when we were students for calling them zombie. But under this constitution, they're not even called a force. It's what? Exactly that, a service to the people. No matter how much power you think you have, if you go wielding it unnecessarily, you're simply going to force a certain reaction from the people.
So during that period, they were waiting to bail protesters. So there was one lawyer who came and he said, she's a journalist, leave her alone. They pounced on the lawyer, gave him slaps, then put him behind a pickup.
We were all here, and then we saw on social media people being picked up. Some of the things were recorded live. People being beaten, jumped into a bus, driven off, their phones being snatched from them. So we were on standby. And because we had already done that arrangement, we were able to represent them in all the police stations that they were taken to. Getting access, even to the police yard, was hell.
And growing up, the orientation is that the police is your friend. That has actually changed. Anything can happen to you in the hands of the police.
I remember in one of the demonstrations we had the hot water tankers from the police being, splashed on those who demonstrated and protested, and I was part of that.
This is wrong. This is purely wrong.
Individually, they are very, very fantastic, intelligent, well-meaning people. So until you have them one-on-one conversation, you would think that the police service is a monster.
We should continue to remember those demonstrators are human beings like us, and therefore we should treat them with all the respect, the severity, and the dignity that each and every human being deserves. In effect, we should treat them the way we would have loved to be treated if we were on the other side. If anybody needs help, help the person, and do that with a sense of humility and humanity.
After such a promising start, what a disappointing outcome.
Another tear gas. All of these people, they were not part of the protesters. Many of them had to run here to pour water on your faces. Tell me, where exactly were you before they fired the tear gas?
I had a problem with my Ghana card, and I had to go to DRA to work on it. So me, as a matter of fact, I'm not part of the protesters, but you see what I'm going through, and I'm so scared.
Were you part of the protesters?
No, please.
This is a marketplace, and the activity that is going on there, it's not everybody that is in it. So for them to have thrown tear gas into public in the marketplace like this, so burning, some serious burning sensation in the nose, in the eyes, and all over the face, I don't think it's the best. The lady fainted here. I mean, she could have just died, and I'm not even sure that lady was part of this demonstration.
You know, I come back to this resonating idea that protest won us independence. It made us who we are as a society and as a country. That we ought to be able to understand its political, socio-cultural value and its historical significance to us as a people and how we move forward.
So if we could connect those kinds of pre-colonial, anti-colonial, and post-colonial actions, I think it would help to give us a fuller history of ourselves, allow us to also understand the different kinds of protests, you know, and the roles that different people have played.
Some protests are by writing letters and getting a number of people participating in presenting such a protest.
Some people protest through their music, through their spoken word artistry, even in their teaching, you know.
Fellow Ghanaians, I can't be please, listen to me please. Power, go change everything is again. I just need to power.
It's important to understand that one is all you need. But more often than not, people either underestimate the power of one, or they seem to be in a minority.
We don't need any discussion on this. Drop that chamber! Drop that chamber! Drop that chamber! I will say what has to be heard. Do we need a new parliament in this country at this time? We lack the courage to tell them the truth.
It's not about the number of people. It's more about the issue. It's more about the conviction that one is enough.
There's this saying that there is a job that needs to be done, and someone definitely needs to do the job, but everyone assumes anyone can do it, so no one ever gets it done.
You go feed to fish and catch mommy water. Everybody go get 3-bedroom.
Somewhere around 2014, I began to feel in very direct ways the effects of some of the decisions that happen in Ghana's political space. For instance, I started making work that spoke about society in maybe a different light already, but it had to become political graphic art because I've seen how actors in the political field, have used art, sometimes I say against the people. So it's also a very viable approach for the people to use art against that establishment, either to question it or to deconstruct it, to challenge it, to test boundaries. There's so much art can do. Like I said, there was a job that needed to be done and somebody had to do it. And maybe that someone became me.
Rest assured, nobody is intimidating you. Allow traffic to flow because people are also suffering.
It is important that the same adherence to rules that we demand of government, we as organizers and protesters also keep to the same rules. I do not think that it helps to overly inconvenience society by the methods that we use in our protest. So for example, if we block the road in a manner that makes, say, a sick person traveling in an ambulance difficult to secure medical health, then we are destroying from within what we set out to protect from without. Nobody should ever think that the state or anybody in power is going to facilitate your protest, to force them to act in the ways that you believe is good for society. Because of democratization and the party politics, partisanship conflates public positioning on issues. And so it is either possible for a protest to be hijacked by the political opposition, or that a government can use partisanship as the excuse. And therefore, when they are dealing with protesters, they tend to deal with them as if they are dealing with political opponents.
I also noticed that there were some unscrupulous persons that were planted amongst us to create some form of chaos and provocation so that the police would go out of character. So when you get yourself in the positions where you are bought to be planted amongst well-meaning Ghanaians trying to fight for a better life for you, then you need to check yourself.
One of the ways in which we decided to purposefully mobilize is that we don't want leadership. And the reason why we don't want leadership is that if you look at past protests, those individuals that led those protesters use that as a vehicle to project themselves into the status quo politics. But the absence of leadership does not mean the absence of structure. We have marshals that we are trained, that were reflectors, that police for us the protests, that ensure that the interaction between police and protesters do not happen.
They are marching towards the Jubilee House, and it looks like there has been a standoff between them and the police.
In 1995, when we organized the Kumipreku demonstration, people died. They were killed. They were shot and killed by agents of the government then. Now, one of those who died was Ahunu Honga, a student, a young student. Now, today, I'm just imagining a situation where the family of Ahunu Honga is observing what is happening in our country today and realizes that some of the people who organized that demonstration are in government and are doing exactly what Ahunu Honga and others lost their lives, for. I mean, it's incredible. And I don't see how our politicians manage to walk about with their conscience intact.
Because of the law, that's why I'm here. Yeah, what are you going to? You got to sleep on empty stomach while they get satisfied.
Protests yield results. They do yield results. And across time and space, we have seen it. Whether you are talking about the Million Man March by Martin Luther King or the recent protests that the young people are organizing. If it had no impact, the state would ignore it. So when you see the state responding, either through the security apparatus like the police or public statements by political leaders or any such thing, it should tell you that it's hit a nerve.
So we are appealing. Come back to work.
Number two is that it has a way of chipping off the popularity and sometimes even the credibility of the managers of the state over time. In a democracy, that can create electoral deficit over time.
I give you one particular example, the injustice against the 499 law students who took the entrance exam. I was part of that demonstration, and I can tell you, we went to Parliament, we put in our petition. At the end of the day, these 499 students were taken into the professional law program. That is part of the successes of demonstrations in this Fourth Republic. There have been some taxes that have been abolished because people went out on the streets to protest.
To the people of Kenya who have said loudly that they want nothing to do with this Finance Bill 2024, I concede, and therefore I will not sign the 2024 Finance Bill.
My question is, has the parliamentary chamber been built? It's been how many years now? It hasn't been built. So if that is not resource, then I don't know what else may constitute resource.
In Namibia, a young woman was killed, and they launched a protest called Shut It All Down. So many people took to the streets to demand from the government to take action, and they got the government to commit to solving this issue and creating a sex offenders list, for example, in Namibia. And we have Black Lives Matter, we have George Floyd. These raise awareness to issues of racism, issues of dictatorship, press freedom, abuse of women's rights, and it can push governments to create change.
Do so we see change.
Protest is inalienable to humans. It's part of our DNA. And so to criminalize protest is to criminalize our being.
It takes away the cynicism, oh, nothing is going to change, because if people don't protest, if they feel that they do not have that right or that nothing can change, this is really an incitement to violence.
Free expression is important for those who rule us and those who take decisions about our now and our future to know what people really feel and think. Would you rather have a civil war than have people marching with their feet on the streets?
In fact, history is a constant reminder that the people, the masses will always win, no matter how long it takes. So anyone who is suppressing protests is indirectly calling for something more harmful or more disruptive than protest.
And we believe sincerely that our protest is keeping this democracy alive. Because so many people have told us about how they were so angry about something in the state of the country and participated in a protest, and they felt that they have done something. The more willingness to engage in a democratic process, whether attending a protest or donating to protest movement, those initiatives of mobilizing citizens towards delivering social and public goods, that evolve out of a protest culture naturally.
And so protecting the protest is the collective and individual mandate of all.
Meanwhile, Amnesty International Ghana has condemned recent violence and killings of protesters in Sudan.
Protect the Protest is actually a global campaign that Amnesty International launched because there's been a huge increase in protests across the world, and we all know the right to protest across the world is under threat. So it was very important that we launch a campaign on this so that we find out how to protect protesters and to what extent can security forces also protect protesters. People need to understand the human rights violations during a protest. Are we committing human rights violations during protests? Are people's rights being taken away from them? So we will train our staff, first of all, to see how best to observe protests when they do happen in Ghana. We're also going to train persons who are likely to have protests. And then we'll also engage with the security agencies. That's also very important because we want to know, is Ghana following the international standards for peaceful assembly? So this is something we're really going to engage and ensure that the police are not abusing protesters, but protecting them as they should be.
The ex-servicemen protests, which led to the death of Sergeant Ajete and so on, provided an impetus for the attainment of national independence. Today, we are in this bourgeois democratic order because of the various protests which was organized over the years, because of the sacrifices that people made in speaking out. Majority viewpoints today were not majority viewpoints yesterday. It is mobilization, it's agitation, it's education, and so on, which moves ideas from the minority frame into the majority frame. And I think that protests are exceedingly important for any democratic order, even the bourgeois democratic order.
Because sometimes the thing people protest about, the stance of the protester, the position of the protester, might one day become the norm.